Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. It is a new year. It's 2021, and I'm sure most of us love putting 2020 in the rearview mirror. It doesn't mean things magically changed as that calendar flipped over, as that clock went past midnight, but it is a new year. 2020 was hard, had lots of challenges. Again, doesn't mean they're all gone, but now it's a new year, a new season. And for the next 2 months or so on the podcast, we're going to focus on the topic of volunteers, which I know a lot of churches are starting to meet in person or have been for some time, and recruiting volunteers and having enough volunteers to pull that off has been a challenge. So even if your church isn't meeting now, and that's still in the days or months ahead, this is something I'm sure that you want to think about. And so what we're going to do is the next 5 episodes, we'll have conversations about volunteers. It won't be a conversation. It's more that guest teaching about a topic. And today we have Alison Leamon teaching about recruiting volunteers in a different context, which we are certainly in, right? You can't recruit volunteers the way you used to when a number of people aren't ready to come back to in-person church, and when a lot of the volunteer recruiting you might need to do is for digital or something like that, or new roles, things that didn't even exist a year or two ago. So things are going to look different. So Alison's going to talk about that. You can get all the links and notes and everything at nickblevins.com/episode 216. But something brand new that is out that I'm excited about with Ministry Boost to help you recruit volunteers is a new 28-day challenge to recruit volunteers called Volunteer Boost. We've taken the best and most critical aspects of some of our volunteer courses on recruiting and onboarding volunteers, and we're putting that in this 28-day challenge so that you can do the most important things fast to be able to recruit volunteers, because we know one of the barriers to recruiting is you don't give it enough time. Well, this 28-day challenge will help with that, because you have to commit to give 8 hours a week for the 4 weeks. So you're really going to put in the time. You're also going to have a system that you can keep using going forward so that you're giving the time to it. Now, it won't be 8 hours a week. Maybe it's 2 hours a week. But if you can build it over these 28 days, given that 8 hours a week, and then you can manage it on just 2 hours a week after that, you'll be in a great spot for recruiting volunteers. But the other barrier is not having a strategy or a system. And the Volunteer Boost 28-Day Challenge will give you that as well. But here's the deal. It starts next week. So if you're listening to this podcast when it comes out, the first week of January 2021, Volunteer Boost launches next week. It starts on Monday, January 11th, which means you have to sign up by midnight Sunday, January 10th. And it's $37 for your entire staff. So whether it's you doing it on your own, or if there's other staff who lead volunteers and you want to bring them along with you, it's just $37. It's a 28-day challenge. You'll get 30 short teaching videos where we're going to kind of teach you what to do and how to do it. And you'll sort of be running 2 tracks at the same time. You'll be communicating in ways to recruit right then. And then you'll also be building and planning things that you're going to put in place to have your system complete. So you got a great volunteer and onboarding system. And you'll get documents, a workbook. There will be weekly live Q&A calls. There's accountability in the sense that you'll be filling out a form each week. We're going to give away prizes, over $1,000 worth of prizes. So our hope is to help you recruit more volunteers by giving you the accountability, helping you commit to the time, and give you the system and the strategy to make it work. So you can check that out at ministryboost.org/volunteerboost, or click the Volunteer Boost link there at the top. But without further ado, let's jump into this conversation about volunteers with Alison, talking about recruiting volunteers in a new context.
I'm excited to talk with you guys about recruitment. Recruitment is one of the things that it drives my team crazy, but I'm so passionate about it because I've just seen so much life change happen through it. And I know that each of you have stories like that. But it's a weird time. So for us, I'm here in the Dallas, Texas area, Frisco, Texas at Preston Trail Community Church, and we have been open in person for 1 week. So I don't know that I have a lot of experience there. We've been closed for 6 months, and so we've had a lot of the at-home ministry, of the online ministry, and now we're committed to doing both. So we have a full online campus and in person, and so that's the reality that we are in right now. I know for some of you guys, your doors are open. Some of you guys, your doors are closed. Although I think we would all agree that church is not closed, no matter if your doors are open or are closed. That's been one of the greatest learnings I know my team and that I've had in this season is that, man, the church is not a place. The church is people. And so for me, the heart of what we're talking about today, the heart of why we are focusing on volunteers for multiple hours on a Wednesday afternoon is because the church is about people and volunteers are our people. Like that is ministry. And so I wanted to start talking about recruitment with our why, because I kind of felt like our why has really been exposed about how much do we really believe that church is about people, not a place? How much do we really believe that volunteerism is discipleship? That why, I know for my team and for me, has really bubbled up, and the cracks that we had there have become some gaps. And so I heard it once said that we don't use people to get stuff done. We use the stuff to get the people done. That when we bring people when we invite them into a serving role using their spiritual gifts, that they get to connect to God in a unique way, and they get to be part of the church living out its mission and out its movement. And that whenever our why is right, we know that we're not filling spots. We are part of growing souls closer to Jesus, more in line with their purpose and with the church at large. Volunteerism at its heart has always been about discipleship. And I think that why is super important to just really re-brainstorm, to really refresh in our hearts and our souls. Matthew 1:15-19, it's Jesus' first recruitment, right? He says, the time has come. The kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe the good news. That's his why. It's clear. And then as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once they left their nets and they followed him. Jesus' why was clear. And I think our why for ourselves, for our high-level coaches, for our ministry volunteers that are right there with us and linking arms with us and helping us recruit, our why matters. It's foundational. If there's cracks in that belief, then there will be cracks in how we follow up with people, with how we speak to people, and with how we make our asks. And so that's just some soul work that I know I've had to do, that my team's having to do, to really check our motive of why are we making an ask? Because if we're making an ask because it's about us, then we're asking something from people and not something for people. And then our heart's off a little bit, right? Ephesians 4 tells us that our job is to equip the saints for the good work of ministry. Our job is to give our jobs away. Our job is to hold it so loosely that when we find someone who feels so compelled to be the church in kids ministry and student ministry and guest services and large group, that we get to pass it off. And so our why has not changed, whether we are fully online, whether we're fully in person, or whether we're doing both. Our why is to equip the saints, and volunteerism is a part of that discipleship strategy. Okay, so who are we trying to recruit? Now, I think we would all just say who's available, who's ready, who's there. But I think really thinking about who we're recruiting, it matters. And so what our teams have done is we've just kind of done a blameless autopsy assessment. We had all of our staff do an assessment of their job. They opened up a Word document. We had them type out everything on their job description. If they're the early childhood director, if they're the student ministry groups director, whatever their job is, write out what is your job, and then assess it and assess what is something that only you can do as a staff member, and what is something that a volunteer can do. Not that you have a volunteer ready and willing, but what is a volunteer, what can they do? Make sure you and your supervisor are on the same page with that. Then we went through and we really kind of started asking ourselves, okay, what would I do if I was consulting for myself, right? Sometimes I can put a different hat on. Or what would someone do after me? If I was gone and someone else hopped into my place, what would they do? Just challenging ourselves to look at our roles and who we need to recruit for. Then we created org charts, new ones in this COVID season for every staff member. And then we plugged in names after we had the org charts. And then we were able to see what spots were there or not. From there, we created an Excel sheet with all 16 of our staff and their list of their respective volunteers to call. And we did a red, green, and yellow temp check. So we did a temp check for each volunteer, and we said that we needed to schedule a one-on-one phone call with every volunteer. At that point, we were all digital. We didn't know when we were regathering at that point. And so we had phone calls with every volunteer. 30 minutes, that phone call was, how are you? We really held ourselves to not even get to the volunteer world thing until after those first 30 minutes to make sure that we were pouring into them first. And then secondly, ask them, okay, say we launch tomorrow. Are you green? Are you going to be in person? Say we launch tomorrow. Are you red? No, you're going to be home and you're online for a while. Or you're yellow. You just want to be touched in and checked in at every point in which something new happens. And so we went through, we assessed our people, we helped fill out our org charts. And then we made job descriptions for what we needed because there were new roles that popped up. I mean, we had a street team that we had to create because we did a lot of like, let's show up in people's neighborhoods and chalk every single Trail Kids or student ministry family that belongs to Preston Trail and let them know that their church loves them, right? We had a street team that we had to build. We recruited some videographers. We had to recruit a cleaning team as we've regathered. We had to have social media volunteers. We had to have online small group leaders. And so we made job descriptions because I believe that when we know who we are recruiting, that God will help bring that to mind. When you think about, man, an online small group leader, they need to be able to translate across a screen. They need to have a little bit of charisma because it's harder to translate across a screen. Man, they may be someone who has medical issues going on. Man, they may be someone who I've seen them be more cautious in this COVID season, right? And so as you start to think about who you're recruiting, if we've been loving our volunteers well and staying connected to them as people first, that helps things come to mind. And I will say, as a little bit of a transparency moment, of my 16 staff, when I see how many people they have returning on their teams, I can tell the people that loved on their volunteers well in the 6 months we were gone because they have higher return rates, like significantly higher return rates. And not just that they so happen to have people that were more COVID conscious or less COVID conscious, but like there was a visible, trackable metric of were we keeping in contact with our people well, and really treating it as discipleship, not just volunteering in the time off. So loving on our people well, knowing who we're recruiting really kept those things in mind. So I think about the why matters, the who matters, and where. And what I love is Jesus models this, right? It's that verse 15, as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee. Recruitment is as you go. It's an as you go kind of recruitment that Jesus asked us into, because as Christ followers who happen to be on staff, maybe you're paid staff, maybe you're unpaid staff, but you're a Christ follower first who happens to be on staff. You may be off the clock and you may go about your day-to-day routine and living life around people, but you never know how that relational moment could be a part of helping someone find their purpose. It may be checking out at a grocery store or a coffee shop or at a soccer game. It may be on social media, right? Like you never know as you go. And so you guys all know those kinds of places you can recruit in. One of our Trail Kids pastor here, one of her kind of leaning into those God nudge moments was at the coffee bar in church. It was probably 9-12 months ago now when we were open and things were normal. And she was at the coffee bar just pouring her coffee creamer in. And this person next to her was just so joyful. And she was like, you are so kind and you are so joyful in like, a 60-second conversation. We're looking for kind and joyful people to serve in kids ministry. Have you ever thought about serving in kids ministry? And she was like, oh, you thought of me? Of me? Like I came across that quickly, right? You never know what those lobby moments can come across. And I think too, leaning into the people who do know who we're looking for. Some of our best volunteers are going to be key resources to find some of your future best volunteers. Maybe it's a spouse or a student they know or a best friend they know. But man, I love a good pray storm session, a little churchy word, but we'll call them pray storm sessions where we'll gather our coaches around and we'll org chart out with our volunteer team, with our current volunteer team. And we have our org charts of our volunteers up in all of our serving centrals, all of our volunteer huddling spaces on site so that everyone can help us recruit and everyone can help us invite the next person in. And so we'll write out names. We'll write out names and we'll pray for them. And man, it may be 6 months, a year. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 years. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 asks. But if we really are asking because we're inviting them into something, it's a totally different ask. And I will say I've been also challenged in this online season as far as the where. Man, our social media as staff. I heard in a podcast the other day that people follow people, not a brand. They follow people, not a brand. So they're following you with your name more than they're following your church's social media account. So what you post, what you like, what you share, it matters. And there's so much ministry to be had there and to be excavated there. So maybe it's following up with people who are commenting on your post in private DMs and just checking in on them, loving on them. Maybe it's commenting on their posts and building relationships digitally. Maybe it's looking at the MailChimp opens and clicks and following up with those people and scheduling coffees, whether they're in person or they're digital check-ins. You just want to check in with people and see how they're doing as parents, as staff, as church family members. If you see one glimpse of something that is winsome, that is attractive, that is engaging, You, as a staff member, get to speak life into that spark. You see a budding characteristic in someone, and they don't even know what it could be fanned into flame when it's used for the power of Jesus, for the power of the kingdom. That's what you get to do. You get to say, man, I really saw how you interacted with your kid in this tough time. That is a gift. I would love for more kids at our church to get to experience the love like you just showed your kid. Man, if our kids really were loved like that, they would know the church is a safe place to run to and not from when life got messy. That's the power of words. It's the power you have as a staff member to identify sparks and tell them what those sparks could be if they were fanned into flames. What sparks are you seeing on social media, in emails, in parent coffees or phone calls? Are you having parent coffees and phone calls? Right? Like, look for sparks. That's my favorite part of ministry, is getting to fan some of those into flame. So where do you recruit? As you go. And last is how do you recruit? When you look at how Jesus did it, man, he said, come, follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people. He did not say, I have this job my father gave me. I'm going to need some people to do it. I know you're really busy. I know you have jobs to do. It's a really big ask. Could you just do this like once a month to help me get by? No. He called people out of their current vocation, out of their darkness and into light. He called people out of a mundane day-to-day life into a ministry, a calling, a passion. He didn't downplay the ask. He highlighted it, that you're going to get to fish for people. Are we really casting a compelling vision when we're inviting people in to be ministers, to be little mini youth pastors and kids pastors out in our areas? Are you casting a big vision, or are you casting a small vision? It goes back to your why. Are you filling a need, or are you growing souls? Don't apologize for your ask. Don't say no for people. Have those I see in you conversations. I see this in you. That's the fanning into flame. Ask for what you want for them, not from them. And don't wait. Leaders don't wait. Leaders go after, they go to, they show up on the doorstep, they go and share. It is the Jesus way. We don't wait for our inboxes to get full of volunteers signing up. And if you're that church, tell me how you're doing it. But we don't wait for people to sign up, to reach out. We go to. We look for sparks relentlessly because we want to invite people into a compelling mission and vision that is larger than themselves, because people need that. It gives them hope. It gives them purpose. It's changed my life. And I'm pretty sure it's probably changed yours too. Andy Stanley says to marry your mission and date your model. When you think about volunteers, our mission is to help people find and follow Jesus, to grow in their relationship with Jesus through volunteering. That volunteering is discipleship. That is our mission of volunteerism. And for all of our churches, you can word it however works for your church, right? Our strategy, our model has been weekly in-person services. Maybe that's different right now. How do we still help people connect to God and their purpose and the church through volunteering in a different model? It's a challenge. It's a challenge that none of us have done it before. And so I encourage you that in this season, man, I'm in development. I have told my boss I'm in development. I've told my staff I'm in development, but I can be confident in my development. And you can be confident in your development too.
Well, Alison is one of the wisest and sharpest, best leaders that I know. And that's been true ever since I've known her. She's been wise far beyond her years, as wise as leaders that are 2 times as old, has 2 times as much life experience as her for sure. And I loved hearing from her talking about recruiting volunteers in a different context. And if you noticed, one thing I noticed was that it wasn't a whole different strategy, a whole different approach. Some little things were different, but a lot of it was just core foundational principles for recruiting volunteers. But then how do you apply them in this different context? So I thought that was really helpful. And here are 3 action items I thought of coming out of that. 1, make your list of characteristics. What are the characteristics you want in a volunteer that you're going to recruit? She talked about that. I think that was helpful. Find one place to recruit. So she talked about different places where you want to be for recruiting. And so is that the lobby at your church if you're meeting in person? Is that social media? Maybe if you're not meeting in person, is that somewhere else outside the church? What is one place where you're not normally showing up where you can recruit volunteers as you go? You know, she talked about that, looking around you as you go. And so figure out what that one place is. And then last, find one person to have that I see in you conversation with that she talked about, that you see something in them that maybe they don't see, and you're going to call that out of them and invite them to use that for God's kingdom. You can get all the links and notes at nickblevins.com/episode 216. There will also be a link there where you can go and get notes from this talk, because this was part of Volunteer Boot Camp, an online event we did last year. And so you can register for that for free with Ministry Boost if you want to watch the video of it or download those notes or anything like that. Don't forget, Volunteer Boost starts in 6 days or something like that from when this podcast comes out, and you got to sign up in 5 days. So if you are listening to this the first week of January and you want to recruit more volunteers and you haven't given it enough time and you don't have a great strategy, then Volunteer Boost is probably for you. It's $37 for your whole staff, 28-day challenge. You got to be able to commit the time though. Say that you can commit the 8 hours a week. It's probably more the first week. It's probably 12, and then it's, 8, and then it's 8, and then it's 6. I don't know, something like that. Just because there is a lot week 1 to get it rolling. But you could even be behind and it would still work. I mean, the truth of the matter is, if you took our 28-day challenge, but you were 2 weeks behind and it took you, what's the math on that, 42 days, that would be fine. You would actually still be implementing something great. It would work, The idea, though, is that it's a 28-day challenge just to ramp it up, bring more accountability, get it done in a focused time, especially the building work and the planning and things like that, so that you do have a system that you can keep running for just a couple hours a week, which would be far more than most leaders give to it. So check that out at ministryboost.org/volunteer boost, or just click on the link there. And I'll catch you next week when we come back with another volunteer conversation. We'll have Kelly Stockdale talking about reevaluating your volunteer foundation. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of those episodes. And I'll catch you next week on the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.